All right, we have a hover 3 from Dillan. And looks like we have a hover 3 from Huff. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get our first game of the Classic Tetris Monthly Red Bracket underway. Huff versus Answer the Question, aka Dillan. Here we go in 3, 2, 1, Tetris. So, as always, this is going to be a best of 5. And Huff and Dillan are both going to start off with a Tetris here. It's going to knock down 2 really clean stacking. And of course, the winner of this will go on to play the winner of Alex T and SV. So far, things are pretty stable. Nothing too serious going on here. Huff waiting on a long bar. And so is Dillan. Huff actually having to do just a little bit more burning here. Just forced to have to wait. Nice delayed T-spin setup right there. Or rather, an adjustment. But with that, Huff is pretty good. Dillan has been able to take an early lead. And so far, Huff just waiting on the long bar. Huff actually appears to not be getting too many long bars this game. And decide to go for the safety burns here. Just trying to keep the board under control. Meanwhile, Dillan, beautiful triple into a Tetris here. Huff's gonna knock one down. And Dillan right now with around a 60,000 point lead. But so far, both players keeping everything nice and calm. Now, of course, as you can see, Dillan is tapping while Huff is rolling. So we're going to see that come into play on 29 and to some extent on 19. Even though Dillan can tap pretty fast, Huff is still going to have the ability to play higher and survive some more dangerous situations. But so far, everything is pretty clean for both players. Huff making the adjustment, able to knock down a Tetris. 332 to 297. Knocks down another Tetris. It goes up to 354. Meanwhile, Huff is right on Dillan's tail. Dillan does have the line advantage, so as long as Dillan continues to score Tetrises, should still be able to maintain a sizable lead. But ooh, Huff with an accidental placement right there. It's going to lead to potentially Huff having to set up for a dirty row 4 Tetris. No, just going to burn this out. Waiting for the ideal piece to try and potentially... Oh, it's going to set up for the column 9. Knocks it down. 374 to now 425. Dillan was able to definitely take advantage of that misdrop, even though it was a couple burn lines from Huff. Dillan is now almost back up to a 70,000 point advantage. But Huff has things under control for the most part. Tetris for Huff, 398. We're looking at around a mid 500k transition for Huff. And we're in 600k transition, maybe even 650 with really efficient play for Dillan here. Huff with a long bar dependency in the center of the stack does not want to make the adjustment and is going to transfer wells instead. Might decide to go dirty and is kind of forced to. These pieces just aren't really very compliant for the stack. And Dillan has been able to build up a 100,000 point lead. Huff still working on trying to get Tetris ready. Meanwhile, Dillan is having to withstand a drought here. The well is open. Sets up a delay burn. Gonna decide to go and burn. Oh, perfect adjustment right there for the eyepiece. Still unable to utilize that eyepiece. Not gonna go for the triple. Just gonna keep this open. Take the safety double. Dillan throwing those pieces over to the left. And is able to finally get a Tetris. Much needed because it was kind of running out of room there. 2 quick Tetrises for Dillan. Not going to be able to transition with a Tetris, but will transition at 578,000. Meanwhile, Huff is going to transition at 512, so was able to close the gap by 60,000 points here before transition and knocks down another Tetris while Dillan is trying to correct the stack here. Dillan now in need of an L or a J. Gets that dependency filled. Could decide to go for row 2 or try and correct the stack. Huff is in a position to try and bring the lead closer. Dillan now aiming to potentially get set up for the center well here. Meanwhile, Huff at 566. 1 Tetris away from Dillan's current score. And Dillan is running into complications. Tetris for Huff, 591 and now 597. Dillan needs the J piece to go over there to the left-hand side. He's able to receive it. 1 Mino shy of getting Tetris ready. Dillan is set up for a center well yet again. Meanwhile, Huff is set up for a regular Tetris. Dillan not getting the long bar for the center well. And a dead drop for Dillan. That could be incredibly deadly here. And Dillan just cascading misdrops. And with that, Huff is good for game number 1 at 626, now 654. Just a really unfortunate situation for Dillan there. All right, we got a ready. Well, we got hover 3 from Dillan. And we have hover 3 from Huff. So let's go ahead and count them down to game number 2. Here we go in 3, 2, 1. Tetris. So just a really unfortunate early post-transition for Dillan. Had a sizable lead going into 19 and then was unable. Wow. 1 piece shy away from a perfect clear for Huff. But was just unable to kind of get into a comfortable scoring position. And each time a center well was set up, the long bar just did not come and led to more complications, followed up by a couple of misdrops that just cascaded the board out of control. But game 1 has been written in the books, and it's time we turn the page on this chapter of our CTM bracket. And to start things off, looks like both players are playing pretty evenly here. Dillan going for more conservative burns instead of trying to play too aggressive. So it's gonna knock down a Tetris there. Huff answers with one of his own. And 100,000 at 24 lines. Definitely possible for 600k transition. Of course, we are incredibly early here in the game. But Dillan sets up a delay burn. It's going to decide not to convert it into a center well, just going to hold out for the long bar. And patience pays off as a long bar comes and allows Dillan to score a Tetris. A nice little overhang over there for Dillan. 215 for Huff, 173 for Dillan, approximately the first 45 lines or so. So, ooh, Dillan looks like potentially some indecision there. Or just unable to really get the long bar over. It's going to complicate things just briefly Gonna translate to approximately 7 or so burns. And, you know, it doesn't seem like a lot, but 7 or so burns could translate to 2 extra Tetrises that your opponent can get that you're unable to replicate. And in the case of Huff, who's known to be an efficient player more often than not, you know, that's just essentially giving Huff an extra 40,000 point lead. And that's what you can see right here, separated by 40,000 points. But a Tetris for Dillan and Tetris for Huff, 289 to now 250. Both players absolutely clean stacks. We're just about halfway through. Huff in the 600k transition territory, and Dillan in the high 500k transition territory. With peak efficiency, a 600k is possible. However, sometimes it's best to play, I wouldn't say play safer, but play smarter. Not necessarily throw your board just to try and get a 600k transition. And speaking of throwing, RNG's kind of throwing for Dillan right now, not giving Dillan a long bar, forcing Dillan to have to take some burns. Long bar comes when the well is covered, as always, and still comes when the well is covered. Oh, that misdrop is going to be deadly. This is going to be a top out for Dillan at 306,000, so Huff is good for game number 2. And we have a hover 3 from Dillan, so let's go ahead and count them down to game number 3. We're going 3, 2, 1, Tetris. So Huff already with 2 games, 1 out of the 3 that is needed to advance to round 2. Dillan started off hot, and unfortunately game 2 didn't quite pan out in his favor. We'll see if he'll be able to turn things around and potentially shift the momentum in his direction. But that's one thing that, you know, Huff is known for, is taking momentum and just absolutely running away from it. He's done so multiple times in CTWC, at least in 2020 and 2021. And so it's not irrational to think that he can do it here again tonight. And taking that momentum, going up against either Alex T or SV, which we'll find out later, it's going to be very instrumental into advancing to the top 4. But beautiful line spin over there by Huff. To start things off with, Dillan is actually playing slightly more efficient than Huff here in the opener. As a matter of fact, Dillan has only burned 1 line. And we saw this kind of opener similar in game 1. But also Huff is a lot more efficient this game than he was in game 1 too. Just look at him, just able to just roll these pieces over. Both players really clean so far. Not really too much danger. But Dillan off to an absolutely fantastic start. Huff 189 at 41 lines is definitely incredibly solid. However, Dillan has only burned 2 lines so far. Nice adjustment on the L. There's another Tetris for Dillan and for Huff. 252 to 213. We already almost passed the scores that we had in the last game. Almost 30 lines earlier. So Dillan is fighting the best that he can here. He's going to be forced to take another burn there. But, oh, nice adjustment. However, Z-piece is going to be very tricky to deal with. So Huff now actually has an opportunity to close the gap that was kind of generated, as Dillan is going to be... Oh, Dillan actually burns out. Huff was able to close the gap by 1 Tetris. Is in need of a J-piece, though. Gets the J-piece for the tuck. All right, perfect T piece over there for Huff. Now just waiting on the I piece. Not quite getting it. Needs an L or a J. That I piece is going to work. Open up the well. And there it is. Tetris for Huff. Able to score another, but that hole is going to have to be dealt with before any more Tetrises can be scored. And it looks like Huff is actually going to go for a column 9 on row 2 here. But as a result, Dillan was able to still build up around a Tetris and a half with a separation between the two. Huff just forced to burn this all the way down. Could try and go for left well, but no, it's just going to go stick with the right well. And that's going to allow Dillan the opportunity to increase the lead by actually almost 2 more Tetrises. There's one. So 424 to now 374. There is a line discrepancy as Huff was burning lines a bit more rapidly. $394 to now $447. And great burn over there for Dillan. Huff in need of quite a couple of pieces here. All right, that L piece is going to be perfect. Trying to avoid creating the long bar dependency. O piece was not ideal. We are nearing the transition though. Dillan is Tetris ready and knocks down a Tetris. Now with more than a 100,000 point lead, Huff cleans up the board, answers back with a Tetris of his own. 453 to 543. Separated by around 90,000 points here. There it is, Tetris. 2 Tetrises for Huff. 499 to 543. And we will transition on the next 2 Tetrises for both players. Let's see if Huff can try and get the last one, or is he just going to take a safety single into the transition? Huff is set up. And Dillan aiming to get set up as well, but Huff with the long bar dependency created. Huff is going to transition at 523, so now has to do some burning to try and clean up the stack. Not a lot of burning, perhaps. Able to make the adjustment to avoid a misdrop right there. Huff is now Tetris ready, holding out for the long bar. So the stack is getting higher and higher, but he's able to get a long bar, knock down a Tetris. 555 for Huff, and now 686 for Dillan. If there's any game to have an outstanding one, this is now trying to change momentum, turn things around here in game number 3. Huff is now built up for and slightly dirty left wall Tetris. However, is in need of a long bar. Long bar is not coming. Forced to do a couple of burns. Not going to go for the tug, just going to go for some flat burns. Meanwhile, Dillan at 741. Huff in the middle of a drought right now, holding out for the long bar. Long bar's not coming, and that placement might do it for Huff. And Huff is going to top it at 593. Dillan avoids the sweep and takes game number 3. And we have a hover 3 from Huff. So let's go ahead and count them down. Here we go in 3, 2, 1. Tetris. And wow. Opposite LJ starts. Pretty peculiar. Anyways, Dillan was able to take game number 3, and Huff with a lot of early game complications. This is definitely going to cost some lines. And Dillan with no stacking errors so far. Forced to do some burning, so having to wait on the first long bar to use for a Tetris. And there it is, Tetris for Dillan. So now this just a timer is ticking to see how fast Huff is able to dig out of this. And how many Tetrises Dillan can score in the meantime. Huff working his way down. Perfect Z piece right there. Gonna hold out for the ideal piece, and unfortunately doesn't quite come. So forced to have to burn 3 more lines. Nice split double. All right, the well is open. Huff is now in position to score the first Tetris. And there it is, Tetris for Huff. Dillan, on the other hand, was able to take quite the advantage here. And definitely in game 4, when it's win or go home, that's exactly what you would like. Meanwhile, Huff now having to play a little bit of catch-up, down by 100,000 points early on. Of course, there is a line discrepancy, and interestingly enough, Dillan is the one that's ahead in lines. So Huff is having to try and match Dillan's pace and really capitalize on moments where Dillan is forced to burn. Of course, we've seen that big pace isn't the end all of a Tetris game. Game 1, Dillan actually had the better pace for majority of the level 18 pre-transition, and unfortunately it led to early top out, just unable to kind of get 19 under control. And speaking about getting things under control, Dillan is having to burn, and so Huff is able to recuperate some of the pace that was lost early game and avoiding taking an unnecessary triple. But, oh, a little bit of an overshoot on that J. So Huff is going to have to deal with that dependency sooner or later. And has decided to pass up on the Tetris. And is going to deal with it now. Meanwhile, Dillan is still aiming to try and bring the stack down. A couple of holes that are complicated on columns 10, 8, and 7. Going to force Dillan to have to resolve them in unique ways, and really like that delay burn with the L piece. And with that, Dillan is going to be just a couple lines away from being back in scoring position. Makes the adjustment on the T, gets the L piece, would love one more, or an I piece. Gets an L piece instead, and just like that, Dillan is open, ready to score a Tetris, and knocks it down. However, the score has been just about equalized. 285 to now 264, favor of Huff right now. So the 100,000 lead that was almost built up at the beginning was completely neutralized by that insanely massive dig. But also props to Huff for being able to capitalize on such a moment. Nice set of J burns right there for Dillan. There it is, Tetris for Huff, 355 to now 312. So Huff looking at a 2 Tetris lead now. Will completely turn the tides of this game, a complete 180. It's now going to be forcing Dillan to have to play up to his level on the post-transition, as we are around 30 lines away from it. Scratch that, 27 lines for both players. And right now, both of them are stacking incredibly clean. Nice tightening adjustment over there by Huff, using the J piece to adjust for the Z piece. Really helps with stack cohesiveness, and it's going to allow Huff to just maintain an absolutely pristine stack and knock down a couple more Tetrises. 447, scratch that, 470 for Huff, 406 for Dillan. We are around 20 lines away from the transition. Dillan sets up a delay burn. Huff is actually having to do a little bit of burning. Eyepiece dependent now in column 2. And Huff is not liking this. Actually going to have to do quite a bit of burning here. Only 10 lines left till the transition. Dillan is in position to capitalize on these last few lines. Meanwhile, Huff, beautiful triple right there. Nice resourcefulness using the pieces. And with this double, Huff is going to transition at 486. Meanwhile, Dillan transitions at 501. So this is Dillan's chance to bring it to a decider. Huff now burning. Opens up the well, knocks down a Tetris, 526 and now 515. However, Dillan does have a quote-unquote pace advantage, is behind by a couple of lines and could use it. Ooh, it's a little bit of a rough placement right there for Dillan, so this is going to allow Huff to take the lead as Dillan is forced to burn 4 lines as a result. Huff is Tetris ready, Dillan aiming to get Tetris ready. Huff goes for the triple, follows it up with a Tetris, 598 for Huff, now 560 for Dillan. Dillan is Tetris ready, knocks down a Tetris. Has a J or an L piece dependency in the center of the stack. Converts the J piece dependency on the left to an LJ and is not getting the L piece whatsoever. Gets an I piece, converting the dependency to a J. Meanwhile, Huff is still in position to continue to extend the lead as this hole is so awkwardly positioned for Dillan, not able to score Tetris until the hole is resolved. In fact, this hole is preventing Dillan from scoring another Tetris. Finally forced to burn a triple. Meanwhile, Huff is up to a 70,000 point lead. Dillan aiming to try and burn this out. Finally burned out. Now let's see what Dillan's going to do. Not going to go for the center well. Not going to repeat any mistakes from game 1, but it's now down by almost 100,000 points. Huff is Tetris ready. Dillan is also Tetris ready. There it is, Tetris for Dillan. 615 now 716. Huff does a little bit of stack sacrificing, so going to have to resolve the hole on, or resolve the overhang on the right-hand side. Does so with 3 sets of burns. 750 for Huff, 680 for Dillan. Huff knocks down a Tetris, goes up to 780, now 100,000 point lead, but Dillan cuts that lead back down, trying to keep things as close as possible. Another Tetris for Dillan as Huff is in the middle of what appears to be a minor drought here. However, holds out just long enough. 812 to now 774. Another Tetris for Huff brings him up to 843. Dillan's still down by 70,000 points, and we are nearing the last 3 levels here of the post transition before we go into post. 877 for Huff, 805 for Dillan. Dillan running into some complications, having multiple specific dependencies developing. Needs something to go there in the center. Gets perfect pieces right there. Meanwhile, Huff is not able to score Tetris just yet. No I pieces coming. Dillan also in need of a J piece. Gets an I piece instead. Needs to open up the well. Look at those fast taps over to the left, but it's not going to be any avail as these... Oh my gosh! Beautiful delay burn. Perfect I piece. Dillan opens up the well, but the well gets covered up again. Reopens it. Where's the long bar? Forced to cover it up again. Now has to tap something over to the left. Gets the long bar over. Opens up the well yet again. But can he get a long bar to score this Tetris? As Huff now goes up to 994. Up by over 100,000 points. 2 quick Tetrises for Dillan. Brings him up to 895. But is going to have to score something in post. The score differential is just too big. Huff knocks down Tetris. Goes up to 833. Meanwhile, Dillan with some more complications. Needs an I piece. I piece is absolutely necessary here. Gets an I piece, opens up the well. Dillan knocks down a Tetris, but not able to really do anything with the left without being able to break any rolling out. And Huff is going to take game number 4 and advance to round 2. Regardless, amazing survival right there by Dillan, having to deal with some of the roughest post-transition RNG we've seen in this particular matchup. Just not really able to score for almost 2 levels and very crucial. But of course, Huff finishing off with a 1.1. It's going to take game number 4 and advances to round number 2.
Hey everybody, this is your old pal Vandweller, host of Classic Tetris Monthly, and I'm asking you to do me a favor. If you like this video, hit thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like it, please subscribe and bang that notification bell. And follow us on Twitch at twitch.tv/monthlytetris. Thank you, and have a nice day.